The legend of Amleth, which inspired Shakespeare's Hamlet, originates from the deeds of the Danes by Saxo Grammaticus. It's a grim saga filled with betrayal, madness, and revenge. Amleth was the son of Horwendel, a Danish noble who gained favor with the king after defeating Norway's ruler. His success sparked envy in his brother Fone, who murdered Horwendel and married his widow, Amleth's mother. Fearing for his life, young Amleth pretended to be mad, rolling in filth and speaking in riddles to avoid suspicion. Fone, unsure of Amleth's true nature, tested him multiple times. One test involved sending a woman to seduce him, but Amleth secretly outwitted her. In another, Fone hid a spy while Amleth spoke with his mother. Amleth discovered and killed the eavesdropper. Eventually, Fone sent Amleth to England with a letter ordering his execution. Amleth rewrote it, leading to the deaths of his escorts instead, and even married the English king's daughter. A year later, he returned to Denmark in disguise, set fire to Feng's hall, and killed his uncle with a clever sword trick, fulfilling his quest for vengeance. The people, moved by his story, made him king. Later, while helping the British king pursue a new bride, Amleth met and married the Scottish Queen Hermantrud, winning her respect through his reputation. Betrayed again by the British king, Amleth used a trick, posing dead soldiers as a ghostly army, to terrify and defeat his enemies. Returning to Denmark, he found that King Rorik had died and Wiglaf now ruled. After a final confrontation, Amleth was killed in battle, and his widow Hermantrud surrendered to the victor. Though his life ended in tragedy, Amleth's legacy lived on as a symbol of cunning, perseverance, and justice. Amleth was the son of King Horwendel, a noble ruler of Denmark known for his valor and victory over the King of Norway. His rising fame and success earned him the hand of the Danish king's daughter, and soon after, a son, Amleth. But Horwendel's good fortune stirred jealousy in the heart of his brother, Fone. Consumed by envy, Fone murdered his own brother in cold blood and claimed both his throne and his wife. To the outside world, it seemed like a new royal union, but to young Amleth, it was the beginning of a nightmare. Fearing he would be next, Amleth chose a dangerous strategy. He feigned madness. By acting like a fool, rolling in dirt, speaking nonsense, and behaving erratically, he made everyone believe he had lost his mind. This clever disguise kept him alive, as Fone saw no threat in a seemingly broken boy. However, the truth was quite the opposite. Beneath the mask of madness, Amleth was watching, waiting, and planning. He knew his survival depended on outsmarting those around him, especially his cunning uncle. His act was so convincing that even the people began to believe he was cursed by fate, reduced to a shell of what he once was. But Amleth's apparent insanity was a cover for something far greater, a patient and calculated pursuit of justice and revenge for his father's death. In the shadows of a corrupt court, Amleth's story of survival had only just begun. To avoid being killed by his treacherous uncle Fone, Amleth crafted a brilliant and dangerous deception. He pretended to be mad. Knowing that any sign of intelligence or ambition might mark him as a threat, Amleth chose to mask his sharp mind behind the guise of a fool. He lived in filth, refused to bathe, and rolled around in the dirt like a madman. His clothes were torn, his hair unkempt, and his speech was a strange mix of riddles and nonsense. Some believed he had lost his wits. Others whispered that his madness hid deeper meaning. Either way, his act convinced the court that he was harmless. But behind the wild eyes and bizarre behavior was a young man filled with grief, rage, and determination. Amleth watched everything carefully, listening to whispers and observing his enemies while pretending not to understand. His apparent foolishness allowed him to survive in a deadly world where showing his true self could mean death. Fone, suspicious of his nephew, repeatedly tested him, sending spies, seducers, and traps to reveal the truth. But Amleth outwitted them all, staying one step ahead each time. He even used his madness as a weapon, twisting it into a cloak of protection. His charade was not easy. It meant enduring humiliation, isolation, and sorrow. all while carrying the heavy burden of his father's murder. But Amleth never wavered. His madness was a mask, and behind it, a brilliant mind waited for the perfect moment to strike. Through this clever disguise, Amleth turned weakness into strength and madness into the ultimate shield. His story became a symbol of how patience and wit can triumph over brute power and treachery. Still suspicious of Amleth's madness, Fone decided to test whether his nephew was truly insane or simply pretending. Convinced that no man of sound mind could resist the charms of a beautiful woman, Fone devised a seductive trap. He sent a woman, known for her beauty and allure, to tempt Amleth and observe his reaction. If Amleth gave in, it would prove he still had his wits and would mark him for death. But Amleth, ever watchful and cunning, saw through the plot. He realized the woman had been sent to lure him into exposing himself. However, instead of rejecting her and arousing suspicion, he turned the scheme to his advantage. Amleth secretly led the woman to a hidden place, far from the eyes of his uncle's spies. There, away from prying ears, Amleth let down his guard. He confessed the truth, that his madness was only a ruse, a mask to protect himself from his uncle's wrath. He then slept with her, not as a fool but as a man fully in control of his mind and mission. Afterward, he made her swear an oath of silence, binding her with trust and secrecy. The woman, moved by his story and intelligence, agreed. She saw in Amleth not a madman, but a prince in hiding, waiting for his moment to strike. When she returned, she told Feng's men nothing, and Amleth's act of madness remained intact. This clever maneuver showed Amleth's brilliance once again. Not only did he avoid the trap, but he also turned a dangerous test into a moment of connection and secrecy. He had danced with danger and walked away stronger, still hidden, and one step closer to revenge. After spending time in exile and gaining new allies, Amleth returned to Denmark, ready to avenge his father's murder. To avoid suspicion, he disguised himself once again as the filthy, raving madman everyone believed had perished abroad. Wearing rags and covered in mud, he arrived during a banquet held in his honor, ironically, to celebrate his supposed death. Inside the hall, the guests were stunned to see him. Amleth played the fool convincingly, staggering around and drawing his sword repeatedly, even pricking his own fingers to appear unstable. Concerned that he might harm himself or others, the courtiers nailed his sword to its scabbard, unknowingly making it useless in combat, exactly as Amleth had planned. As the nobles drank themselves into a stupor, Amleth waited patiently. When the moment was right and the hall was full of drunken, defenseless men, he set the palace on fire. Flames consumed the structure and those inside, eliminating many of his enemies in one stroke. Amleth then moved to confront his uncle Fone, who was asleep in his private chamber and unaware of the chaos outside. Knowing that his own sword had been rendered useless, Amleth quietly switched it with Feng's weapon, which lay beside the bed. He woke his uncle and announced, "The nobles are burning, and Amleth lives to avenge his father." Panicked, Fone reached for his sword, only to find it had been nailed to the scabbard, just like Amleth's earlier. In that moment of confusion, Amleth seized the opportunity and struck him down, ending the reign of the man who had killed his father and stolen his mother. Through patience, cunning, and flawless deception, Amleth finally completed his long-awaited revenge, fulfilling the destiny he had carefully prepared for all those years. With his uncle dead and vengeance fulfilled, Amleth addressed the people of Denmark in a passionate and heartfelt speech. He reminded them of his father's kindness, the pain of his own long suffering, and the justice he had finally brought to the land. He spoke of how he had endured years of pretending to be a madman, all to avenge a father no one else dared to stand up for. His words moved the crowd deeply, some to tears, others to admiration. The people, once unsure of him, now saw the truth. Amleth was not only brave and clever, but deeply loyal to his family and kingdom. Moved by his courage and sacrifice, they declared him king, honoring his patience, intelligence, and unshakable determination. Now the ruler of Denmark, Amleth returned to Britain to reunite with his wife, the daughter of the British king. To commemorate his epic journey, he commissioned a magnificent shield, crafted with great care and detail. The shield bore vivid depictions of his trials and triumphs, his father's murder, his feigned madness, the burning hall, and the slaying of his treacherous uncle. When he arrived in Britain, Amleth was received with honor. The King of Britain, upon seeing the ornate shield, instantly understood what had happened. The images made it clear that Amleth had killed Foam and avenged his father, fulfilling his destiny at last. Though the king had once been Feng's ally, Amleth's honesty and bravery could not be denied. The shield, now a symbol of Amleth's legacy, told a story without the need for words, a story of sorrow, strategy, and justice served. Amleth had come full circle, no longer the madman in the dirt, but a king with a kingdom, a wife, and a legend that would live on for generations. Though Amleth was welcomed back to Britain with apparent kindness, the British king secretly harbored resentment. As a close ally and oath-bound friend of Foam, he could not ignore the fact that Amleth had slain his old companion. Outwardly, the king showed generosity, but inwardly, he began to scheme against the Danish prince. To distance Amleth and perhaps put him in harm's way, the king assigned him a diplomatic mission to travel to Scotland and propose marriage on the king's behalf to the Scottish queen, Hermuthrud. What seemed like an innocent task was, in truth, a veiled attempt to remove Amleth from court and possibly into danger. Obedient to his royal host, Amleth set out with his men, taking with him the magnificent shield that told the story of his revenge. Upon arriving near the queen's lands, Amleth and his warriors rested in a meadow. Scouts from Hermuthrud's court discovered them, and one snuck close enough to steal a glance, and eventually the shield itself. The shield was taken to the queen, who studied its detailed engravings with awe. As she pieced together the tale, the betrayal, the cunning madness, the revenge, and the victory, she found herself deeply moved. Rather than accept the British king's proposal, Queen Hermuthrud declared her admiration for Amleth himself. When Amleth realized the shield had been returned, he knew he had been watched. He acted quickly, capturing the scout and making his way to the Scottish queen's court. Upon their meeting, the queen embraced Amleth warmly, praising him for his bravery and cleverness. She openly declared that she had no desire to marry the British king and instead wished to become Amleth's wife. Soon after, a grand wedding feast was held, and Amleth and Queen Hermuthrud were married. The union not only brought love and admiration but also strengthened Amleth's alliances, ensuring that his legend and his power continued to grow beyond Denmark's shores. Although Amleth had returned to Britain in peace, the British king, still mourning his friend Foam and bound by a vow of vengeance, could not forgive Amleth for killing him. Hiding his true intentions beneath a mask of hospitality, the king invited Amleth to a banquet, secretly plotting his assassination. Sensing danger, Amleth prepared himself. He donned chainmail beneath his garments and quietly assembled 200 horsemen for protection. When he finally attended the feast, the king attacked, hurling a javelin at Amleth. But the blade bounced off Amleth's hidden armor, leaving him only slightly wounded. Amleth fled as chaos erupted, but his loyal horsemen were slaughtered in the ambush. Realizing he now faced a powerful enemy with limited forces, Amleth devised a brilliant and eerie strategy. He gathered the bodies of his fallen warriors, propped them up with stakes, and mounted some on horseback, dressing them in full armor. From a distance, they appeared like a formidable army. When the British forces saw what looked like an undead army rising to face them, fear took hold, and they fled before a battle could even begin. Amleth's real warriors then launched a swift attack, pursuing the fleeing enemy and slaying the treacherous king. The battle was won, and Amleth claimed the spoils of victory. Now free from the British king's threats, Amleth returned home with not one, but two queens, his loyal British wife and Queen Hermuthrud of Scotland. His legend had grown far beyond the borders of Denmark. No longer just the Mad Prince, Amleth was now a cunning strategist, a warrior king, and a man admired across kingdoms. His journey of vengeance had transformed into a legacy of cleverness, survival, and glory, one that would echo in sagas and stories for generations to come. After returning home in triumph, Amleth's peace was short-lived. The old King Rorik of Denmark had passed away, and a new ruler named Wiglek had seized the throne. Viewing Amleth as a usurper and a threat, Wiglek stripped Amleth's mother of her wealth and honor. Enraged by this insult and injustice, Amleth challenged Wiglek's authority, bringing with him the spoils of his British conquest in an attempt to assert his legitimacy. Although Amleth initially managed to subdue Wiglek in a confrontation, he chose not to kill him, an act of mercy that would later cost him dearly. Tensions between them grew, and soon, the governors of Skane and Zealand joined Wiglek, issuing a formal challenge to Amleth. Now surrounded by powerful enemies, Amleth was forced to decide between disgrace or danger. Ever brave, Amleth refused to flee or tarnish his reputation. He chose honor over safety, determined to face the coming storm. He prepared for battle, driven not only by pride but also by love for his Scottish queen, Hermuthrud, who had stood by his side through every trial. Amleth feared more for her becoming a widow than for his own death. As the final battle approached, Hermuthrud vowed not to abandon him, even in death. In the fierce and bloody conflict that followed, Amleth fought valiantly, but Wiglek's forces overwhelmed him. The legendary prince was ultimately slain in battle, his long journey of revenge, survival, and glory ending with a warrior's death. Moved by love and loyalty, Queen Hermuthrud offered herself to Wiglek, surrendering to the conqueror as both a widow and a symbol of peace. Amleth's tale came to a tragic close, but his courage, wit, and sacrifice lived on. He died not as a madman or an exile, but as a hero who defied fate, avenged his father, and became a legend etched into the history of Denmark.